Welcome to Talent Freaks with Andy Coon. I'm Andy, a filmmaker and photographer based in the Bay Area of California. This podcast explores the journeys of people who inspire curiosity, creativity, and impact through their work. In this episode, we're revisiting a conversation from 2006 with Craig Aaron, a media advocate and policy expert dedicated to fighting a more open and democratic media system. At the time of our discussion, Craig was a senior program director at Free Press, working to promote net neutrality and independent journalism. Today, as the co-CEO of Free Press, he continues to lead the charge in protecting media access, digital rights, and press freedom. Now, before we get started, don't forget to subscribe and rate Talent Freaks on your favorite podcast platform. It helps others discover these important conversations, and I'm so grateful that you could do that for me. Now, let's go back to 2006 with a younger version of myself introducing you to Craig Aaron. Well, this week is great. I spoke with Craig Aaron, the communication director of freepress.net, and we spoke about net neutrality. Now, if you don't understand what net neutrality is, just wait. He explains it to the T. I won't do it any justice, but I feel that we need a discussion about net neutrality. What is net neutrality? What are the facts behind the bill that the telecommunications industries want to pass? Why are they spending over $100 million to lobby Congress? There's something going on behind closed doors, and we need to open it up and we need to talk about it, because this is not how we are going to evolve in the world, by covering up everyone's voice and making a two-tiered network. Let Craig explain it to you. He does a great job. So here we go with a conversation with Craig Aaron of freepress.net. When did net neutrality actually come into place? Like, how did you guys come together to start this drive for SaveTheInternet.com?
Sure. Well, the thing to remember is that net neutrality has effectively always been part of the Internet. I mean, since its inception, there have always been non-discrimination provisions that made it so that those companies that controlled the wires couldn't interfere with the content coming across them based on who owned that content, who created it, where it's coming from. And this was always part of our telecommunications law. If you think about the way the phone system has worked in a narrowband world and a dial-up world, you always had lots of choices, and 6 or 7 different providers. If one of them had started to interfere, you would have had another place to go. But more importantly, in the law, in the '96 Telecom Act, and going back before that, clear language on non-discrimination. But what happened is, due to some bad decisions made at the FCC, this long-standing protection was put in jeopardy. So we always had net neutrality, but then in some decisions that came down in the summer of 2005, it was thrown into limbo. They got rid of some old regulations, and with that, sort of a baby with the bathwater kind of thing, they also got rid of these non-discrimination protections, which came to be known as net neutrality. When we got very interested in this issue was in the fall of that year. I mean, we've been involved in that. We filed briefs in the court case and things like that here at Free Press. But in the fall of the year, these telecom executives, Ed Whitaker at AT&T, Ivan Seidenberg at Verizon, the head of Bell South, they all started making these statements about how they were going to build this essentially two-tiered Internet, where they wanted to be able to privilege the content, the quality of service for that content, based on which companies could pay them the most. And they basically came out in front of their stockholders and others and said, "This is our vision for the Internet. There's not going to be a free ride on our pipes." We started looking into it and then started telling a lot of other groups. And, we found that groups across the political spectrum, left, right, and center, everybody in between, were pretty concerned about the free and open Internet, that they had really, built up big memberships, reached a lot of people that maybe didn't know about their issues before, people who were reading blogs. So in April of that year, as a new telecommunications bill started appearing in the House, we started, going and visiting people on the Hill, and also letting everybody we could find know that this was in jeopardy. And when we finally saw the bill in April, it was called the COPE Act, that it wasn't going to reinstate these long-standing protections, wasn't going to ensure that the free and open Internet continued to operate the way it always has, we really started to sound the alarm. And it was at that point that we really set up the SaveTheInternet.com coalition. First a couple hundred groups, then a couple hundred more. Thousands of bloggers started catching on, spreading the word, letting people know that this was going on. And, in a pretty short period of time, this went from a completely obscure issue that nobody had heard of to the number one most contentious issue in this big, massive telecommunications bill, and ultimately the issue that derailed that bill, because so many people were concerned about what was happening to the free and open internet. Now, there's no question that 80% of the country still hasn't heard of net neutrality, but what we saw is once people found out that this law was even being debated, that the future of the internet was being decided behind closed doors without their involvement, without their informed consent, they were pretty angry about it, and they were willing to take action. And so more than 1 million people signed a petition. Hundreds of thousands of calls went into Congress. There were events held in 25 different cities, all rallying for internet freedom, getting behind Save the Internet. And then the internet itself, so many people started using the internet to save the internet. We saw, thousands, tens of thousands, probably blog posts over the last 6 months, and videos, a half dozen new videos every day, and really creative stuff. Now, the big telephone and cable companies really pulled out all the stops. They spent over $100 million to try to push this bill through before the public knew what was going on. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars for people to make slick ads that looked like they were made by the grassroots. But meanwhile, what happened is all these people out there all across the country using YouTube, using other technology, just made their own videos, told their stories, and, really spread the word. And eventually, people like The Daily Show and the national newspapers and all that started to catch on. But it was one of the first examples, I think, of really the net roots really taking an issue and, looking increasingly like one they could actually win on.
Well, some of the and you've done an amazing job. I mean, this is probably one of the best marketing. If you looked at it at a money-wise, a company would love to have the kind of thinking that you have. Because,
the beauty of this whole campaign has been that that no company was involved. We didn't take a single penny from any corporation. Now, there are some internet companies that are on the right side of this issue, and they're very grateful to have all this public support. But the amazing thing has been, just how much creativity is out there. It really shows you why we need to save the internet, because it's all these people, in doing their own thing. Maybe they're into music, maybe they're into cooking. The food blogs all got together, and they each really latched onto this issue. In addition to a lot of the political groups, and it was all grassroots. It was all very organic. To be honest, the small group who first sat down and started building this site, we sort of built the basics in, a couple of days,
right.
In an emergency, because we knew there was a bill coming down. And I don't think we were hopeful we'd have this kind of response, but we didn't necessarily believe it. And then to all of a sudden have so many people getting involved and getting excited really shows that, I think, when you actually go out and talk to the public, when you tell people what's happening, they really do care about it. For so long, people were told, these decisions being made in Washington, they're highly technical, don't worry about them, they'll hurt your head. That's what they were telling members of Congress. Don't pay attention, the lobbyists will take care of it. Well,
Tubes!
Exactly. And you know how much they know about the internet, right? So It's been amazing to see, really the response and the involvement and just the activism. People think people don't care about this stuff, but when you really put it out there in front of them, here's what's happening. The internet, as you've always used it, this unrivaled space for democratic participation and free speech, economic innovation, it's at risk. They really responded, and it's been tremendous to watch.
Something you put up on your site that stands out, and hopefully this catches on in other internet sites, is where you put up, find out where your senators stand about this. You're making them accountable for where they stand on this bill. And what would be great to see somewhere down the future is having a site to show where all your senators, congresspeople, House representatives, stand on a certain issue, or actually they're voting. It's something made easy where people can go and check and see where they stand on it. You're putting a lot of accountability in their hands, right?
Well, that's definitely what we're trying to do, and we also, we drove a lot of phone calls, and with a lot of our allies who went out to their membership, let people know what was going on, and made it so that the phones were ringing off the hook on Capitol Hill, and that they had to pay attention to this issue, because obviously the vast majority of people weren't really paying attention. Maybe they hadn't even read the bill. While net neutrality hasn't quite captured the entire public consciousness, certainly if you're a member of Congress or a staffer in Congress, you've certainly heard about it by now. And I think it is really important. For so long, all these media policy decisions, whether it involved the internet, whether it involved television and radio, they've always been made in Washington. The lobbyists have no problem getting in. It's behind closed doors. It's in the public's name, but without the public's consent. And so, our real goal here was to open it up, shed some light on it, some sunshine, and really make sure that when people go home, when these senators go home, there's somebody there asking them about this issue. And there's people finding out about it and saying, oh, wait a minute, you need to have a position on this. It's not good enough. I don't want to hear about it after you've cast the final vote, deciding what the future of the internet is going to look like. You should take a statement, get it up on your website, and if you do, you'll be rewarded. Your constituents will be told about it. We'll let them know that you're on the right side of internet freedom. And, so a lot of people took that route. Others, of course, sided with the phone companies, and we want to make that clear so that people know, what their elected officials are doing, and so that their elected officials know, people care about the free and open internet, and they're going to remember that come election time.
Now, what are they trying to promise us as if this bill does pass? Are they trying to say that, we're going to get our new media is going to be streamlined, so that's a benefit for this?
Yeah, if you're a phone company executive, what you're saying is going to happen is that you're going to finally bring lower prices, faster service, better products. The problem is that these same guys have been coming to Congress for years with their hands out saying, oh, this is just the last thing, just pass another regulation, a new law for us, and that'll be the thing that brings universal service. That'll be the item that allows us to compete with the rest of the world. And meanwhile, we're falling further and further behind the rest of the world. Much faster, better internet service available in a lot of other countries. The United States ranks 16th in the world in broadband penetration per capita.
It's amazing.
And not moving up at all. Very, very stagnant rate, while, other countries, in Japan right now, they're rolling out 100 megabits per second service. You're lucky to get one here, and really for not much more money than you pay here, and you can certainly get 20, 30 times the speed for the same kind of price here. And, even other countries that are around the United States, sort of in the rankings like France, are putting out triple play options, with phone, cable, internet for, $30, the equivalent of like $30 a month. So that's because they have competitive systems. They've had smart broadband policy, and unfortunately we haven't had that here, and we've given a lot of power to the phone and cable companies. And this attempt to destroy net neutrality, is really their attempt to undercut the content market. Right now your only choice for broadband is phone or cable. You don't really have a third option. There's nowhere else to turn if they start interfering with the content, and they're trying to take advantage of that moment to get some money from a handful of big internet companies. But the real problem is the next, the up and comers, the people that are in their garage right now coming up with the next Google, the next eBay,
right.
All of the bloggers, the podcasters, people who are going around the mainstream. That's the amazing potential of the internet, and they would be seriously harmed without net neutrality. They simply would not be able to reach the audience, and they wouldn't be able to compete with the big guys. If I start a blog tomorrow and Viacom starts a new website, odds are more people are going to go to the Viacom site. They've got more programmers, they've got PR people. But if I hit on something, if I have a really good idea, a new service, a new product, I've got that chance. I've got that chance to thrive on the internet. And I think that's what most people want, an even playing field where if they come up with a good idea, if they come up with an amazing post, an article, it has a chance to circle the globe. And without net neutrality, that becomes a lot harder. The free and open internet starts to look like cable TV. Now, if you're a cable TV executive, if you're a phone executive trying to get in the TV business, you're not going to have a problem with that. You like cable TV. You get to pick the channels.
Right.
You get to own the channels. You get to cut the deals with the sponsors. But that's never what the internet has been about. And, the good news is, I think we're moving in the right direction and making sure that the free and open internet stays that way.
Well, with net neutrality, how they say it's going to be like a toll road. How would that affect small businesses, for instance, or even bloggers?
Well, the fact is that small businesses of any kind and bloggers simply are never going to be able to afford the tolls.
How much would the tolls be?
It's not going to be $1.50 to go into the fast lane. It's going to be millions and millions of dollars.
That's
so
ridiculous.
Once they build this tiered internet, once they erect this toll booth, the only ones who are going to be able to afford to ride in the fast lane are going to be the phone companies themselves, the products and services that they own, because they'll go for free, and a handful of big companies, the same big media companies, movie studios and whatnot, that can afford these exorbitant prices. But your small individual, your entrepreneurs, there's just no way. There's not even going to be an option that you would be able to enjoy the kind of high quality of service that's enjoyed by others. And the fact is that these big internet companies who, maybe they'd be able to, I'm sure Google or Amazon's going to figure out, even in a world without net neutrality, how to survive. But it's the little guy really won't stand a chance. And, these big companies already are paying billions of dollars a year to get that, to get, online when they have these, a Google or something like that. So the phone companies are just looking for additional tolls, an additional way to make a little extra money, and honestly to favor their own services. If you're Verizon and AT&T, the last thing you want is for Vonage or Skype or some competitive phone service offering, low-cost long distance. you're kidding yourself if you think these kind of companies are going to get a spot in the fast lane. And the same thing goes for content. The big movie studios, Disney and whatnot, sure, they're going to cut a deal to be in the fast lane, but the independent video creators, people making new stuff, podcasters, bloggers, not only can they not afford it, but they wouldn't even get the opportunity to enjoy these fast services. But the problem becomes, in this sort of internet of the future, if the phone company model were to prevail, it would be like you'd be watching these big mainstream outlets, on broadband while all the bloggers were on dial-up. That's kind of the equivalent. And as you go to a website and it doesn't load quickly, the odds that you go back are very, very slim.
Now, this is kind of a sort of a serious question. Have you had any death threats from these? Because, I mean, you're standing in a way of a lot of money, and you're putting out the vibe, not to let this happen, rightfully so.
No, I mean, these guys, they play hardball. There's no question about it. They're very entrenched here in Washington, and they, like I say, they've spent, $100 million on lobbying, on campaign contributions, on confusing ads, especially here in Washington. But, they were really caught by surprise in so many ways. They expected to be able to waltz through, do it as they've always done, spend a lot of money in Washington, hope nobody's paying attention, and, this sort of ragtag group kind of got in the ring with them and caught them by surprise. So, we certainly haven't seen the last of the phone companies, and I'm sure even with new leadership in Congress, they're going to be pushing really hard to push their agenda. But, I think the message coming, certainly from millions of people and also now seeing it in these election results is, we don't want business as usual. We don't want the internet to be taken away. We're pretty happy with the way it is, and if it's going to improve, then everybody should have an equal shot. So, that's been, it's been really refreshing, and honestly, they don't know what to do with it because nobody really has challenged them before, or not in recent memory. So I think they're a little taken aback. We certainly expect them to come back in full force here, but I think the bottom line is that they're going to have to find a different way to do this, and start to recognize that just because it's good for the bottom line of Verizon or AT&T or Bell South doesn't mean that it's good for our economy. It doesn't mean it's good for our society. It doesn't mean it's good for our democracy. And ultimately, that's why we have Congress. That's why we have people making smart public policies. It's to ensure that these big, powerful companies are serving the public interest. If we're going to give them the kind of power that we have to dominate internet access. And, in the future, internet access is going to be no different from getting water, electricity, gas. It's going to be a public necessity. It's already becoming one, that kind of broadband access. Certainly to compete with the rest of the world. Certainly, for your kids to succeed. That's what we're talking about. And AT&T and the reconstituted Mobile and the cable companies are going to have to recognize that that's the world we're living in. And then it's just not all about. Every time, it's not necessarily about their bottom line. And an aside there, of course, is that their bottom line is doing just fine.
Yeah. Well, don't you think they just do not know what initiative is, or creativity? It seems like they're just trying to keep the old standard and then just dominate by monopoly and not just
there's no question,
no innovation.
That's the instinct, right? And there's a certain instinct there. If you can take all that power, why not try? And hopefully we're starting to have a public conversation about what the future of the internet should look like that says, no, that's not okay. That's not an option. I believe that if these guys had been put in charge of the internet from the beginning, not only would we probably not have an internet, we'd still have, rotary black phones on the walls because they were making plenty of money when we were doing that. So we're at a point. It's a critical juncture. The technology's in flux. We're not. The landline phone business isn't what it used to be. The phone company wants to be in the TV business. The cable company wants to be in the phone business. But we believe in what we've been working on with our allies is let's give consumers as many choices as possible. Let's have a truly free market. Let's open it up. And we think in the end that's going to lead to lower prices, better service. Much greater innovation. All of these great developments that have happened on the internet, none of them came from the executive suites. They were not coming from telecom executives or cable executives. It was an Israeli high school student inventing instant messaging and some guys in their garage inventing eBay or Google, graduate students, kids starting all these great technologies. And, we've all really benefited from that, including AT&T and Verizon and the rest. And, that's why we think net neutrality is so important, because it has been that foundation that's ensured that even playing field, that's ensured that everybody has the chance to be the next big guy, or even just to survive as a little guy, and reach new audiences, new customers that they never imagined they had before.
Could you talk about the freepress.net, because that's pretty much where this has come out of.
Well, Free Press and our website at freepress.net, we're a national nonpartisan group focused on media policy and internet issues. We're just a couple of years old, but very quickly we've grown. About 350,000 members spread across the country. We work on a number of issues, including media ownership and public broadcasting, and we've become very involved with these internet policy issues. And really the idea behind Free Press is to connect people out in the country with these media policy decisions that have been made in their name for a long time here in Washington. So we have a couple lobbyists of our own, 3 of them, that make the rounds on the Hill, and we have a field operation, people that go out and organize these local events. And as far as Save the Internet's concerned, we coordinated the coalition. We did some of the initial outreach and built a core group of allies who have really spent a lot of time working on this issue. A number of groups, the Consumers Union, Move On. Even the Christian Coalition at this point has stepped up and done a lot on the issue of net neutrality, and to the point where now we have over 800 groups that have gotten involved, have put out information to their members on the issue. And our role is really just to try to coordinate, keep them updated, and talk to the folks on the Hill, and also hopefully start figuring out how to talk about this issue to millions and millions of people across the country.
Well, Craig, thank you so much. You're really doing a great job. And first of all, just thank you for the interview. I appreciate you taking the time out to do this for me.
Oh, well, certainly always happy to do it, and I certainly encourage your listeners to, check out freepress.net, certainly savetheinternet.com, all the latest information. The news right now is fairly good. I mean, there is a lame duck session. We need to make sure that this bad telecom bill does not happen between now and the end of the year. But the good news is if it doesn't pass, and it's looking increasingly good that the good guys might actually win one here, Congress is going to have to tear it up and start all over again in 2007. And as far as we're concerned, that's the best thing that could happen. Let's actually, members of Congress should be going out to their districts and meeting with people and saying, well, what do you think the internet should look like? We know what AT&T thinks. What do the average internet users, the bloggers think? And, I really encourage people to just make themselves heard. It's worth it. Send those letters to Congress, send those emails, sign those petitions, and you can battle with the big guys.
That's what I was going to ask. I'll say, what can me personally do to help?
I mean, the best thing you can do is, first of all, just tell your friends and neighbors, your listeners, your readers that this is going on, because they're not necessarily going to hear about it from the nightly news or the big papers. So get out there and let them know it's happening. And right now, it's really important that members of Congress, especially new incoming members of Congress, start to hear about this issue, know how important it is, and know that their constituents care. So putting those phone calls in, sending those letters. Really still very crucial, and hopefully we get this new Congress really behind net neutrality, and then we can start talking about even bigger issues. What's the shape of the internet? What's the future of the internet going to look like? What should it look like? How do we create universal, affordable broadband for everybody? Those are the kind of things we should be talking about in Congress. And the first step is making sure that this even playing field that's always been there continues to exist.
I'd like to thank Craig Aaron again for coming on to a conversation with Coon and speaking with me. And I hope this helped people understand what net neutrality actually is and what we can do to help net neutrality, and also what we can do to help get our senators and congresspeople to understand that this is an important topic. Please stop by freepress.net and check out their website. They have so much information that can help us have a better internet, also better media and better life in the future. They have an action center where you can have National Conference for Media Reform, Stop Big Media, Save the Internet, Untangle the Telecom Act, Stop the AT&T merger, Save Community Internet, No Fake News, Protect Public Media, Defend Local Access, Tune Out Radio Payola, Action Squad HQ, and Download Activist Tools. They have it all here for us. They make it easy for us to be a part of it, and also to move forward and to make sure our voices are heard, what we want.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Talent Freaks. Craig Aaron's dedication to media reform and digital rights is a crucial reminder of the ongoing fight for a free and open internet. His work with Free Press continues to shape the way we access and consume information in the digital age. To learn more about Craig's work, visit freepress.net and follow Free Press on social media for updates on their advocacy efforts. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast. It truly helps others discover these insightful conversations. If you want to know more what I'm up to, visit talentfreaks.com, check out some of my videos that I've done, some of my photography that I love doing. And if you have suggestions for future guests or topics, feel free to reach out. I'm always eager to bring new and exciting conversations to the podcast. And say hi. Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and stay curious.